and welcome to episode 1 of the 3-octave major scale practice play-along track, or I guess maybe it's a practice-along track. In this first episode, I'm going to do two things. Number one, I'm going to give kind of an overview of the scale and identify some things that may need work even before you start practicing with a metronome. And then the second thing is we're going to go through the scale and play 1 note per bow, 2 notes per bow, 3 notes per bow, etc. And I'll talk about the objectives when we get there. The objectives of this first part are to be thinking more strategically in your practicing and how you approach something. So when I look at the scale, there's a few things that I know right off the bat are going to be challenging, and I'm going to use that same sort of preemptive strike practice approach, not only for this scale, but all the things that I do, whether it's an excerpt, a solo piece, a technical exercise, a scale, an arpeggio, whatever it is that you're doing. So when I look over the C major scale, there's a couple things, the 3-octave C major scale, there's a couple things right off the bat that stick out to me. First of all, I know that this the shift to thumb in the second octave is going to be challenging. That's going to be a really large shift. We're going from a very high numbered finger, the highest numbered finger, to the lowest numbered finger. So we know that the shift itself is going to be large. Okay, and also just getting the weight of the thumb into the fingerboard is going to be challenging for those who aren't quite as well versed in thumb position. So I'm going to start off by just doing the simple shift for this. And what I'm going to do is when I'm playing the shift, I'm going to really imagine the weight transferring as evenly as possible from one finger to the other. It's that analogy of when you're walking, there's a very even weight transfer. So what that means is when I'm on fourth finger and I start shifting with my thumb, I'm thinking about the weight of my arm being totally engaged in the fingerboard about the time I play the F that the fourth finger just left. And then the reverse is true on the descending. We've got the weight in for the G, and I'd recommend stopping the note even though it's a harmonic here so that you just practice shifts in other locations as well where there's not a harmonic, so you might as well do that practice now. The same is true on the reverse. We've got the weight into the fingerboard on the G, and when my fourth finger is coming up underneath the thumb, the weight of my fourth finger is into the fingerboard about the place that the thumb is leaving. So the simple shift exercise. And then descending. You can also apply the simpler shift exercise, which we'll hit in a later episode. If you wanted to do it here, it would look, this is the hardest one to do, but here we are. And then descending. Okay, one final thing about the shift before we leave. You'll want to anticipate thumb position when you're playing the F so that you're not going from here to here on each one of those notes. Okay, the next thing I know is going to be challenging is just this first thumb position, the spacing of the thumb 1, 2, 3, especially for people who aren't quite as familiar with thumb position. So I'm going to play that position first and then talk about some ways to practice it. So again, thumb 1, 2, 3 on so, la, ti, do. Okay, so the first thing you can do is just use the patterns that are in the workbook. So it would just be up and down would be the first one. The next thing you can do is just sort of trill between the notes in that position just to make sure that the spacing is correct, and also to work on the strength and independence of the fingers. And then reverse. Something else you can do is just be thinking about patterns. You can think about it mathematically as you want. If you have 0, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, the first one would just be 1, 2, 3, 4 up, which we just did. The next one would be 1, 2, 4, 3. Just kind of go, up what it would be mathematically and practice all those patterns. One other thing you can do is 3-note groups. I find that to be really useful, especially like ones that involve 3. So for example, I may practice this because I know that the 3 between 3 and 2 is going to be challenging. You can do the same pattern on thumb 1, 2. But I find that's going to be helpful for just orienting myself for thumb position. There will be more about thumb position in another one of these videos. So then what I know is going to be challenging after I get that hand position together is basically any of the shifts in the 3rd octave are going to be challenging. So I'm going to apply the simple shift exercise to those as well, and perhaps the simpler shift exercise. The most challenging is going to be the top one between G and A. So I'm going to do some simple shift exercise between these. First, C to D, descending. The same principles are true in terms of the evenness of the weight transfer. Then between Mi and Fa, 2 and 1. And then reversed. And then again, the hardest one between 2 and 1, the G to the A between So and La. Wasn't very good, I'll do it again. My La wants to be flat, I'll do it again. And then descending. My La is a little bit out of tune. I'll work on that on my own. And then finally, something else I know is going to be really challenging in this scale is just these upper 3 notes, 1, 2, 3. And just because the spacing is going to get so small that, like if I play with flat fingers other times when I'm playing the bass, it's really not going to work here. So I'm going to play those 3 notes and really play on the tip of the finger, so I give my fingers sort of the geographic space to be able to play this. So La, Ti, Do. Especially that half step between Ti and Do. I really can't do it unless I'm really on the tip of the finger, so I'm really feeling the bone. Okay, so those are sort of the fundamental things before I do anything that I'm going to think about and maybe warm up with and play. And when I do this, I'm going to practice really slowly and be thinking about making the connections really, really strong. I say this all the time in lessons, but you want to think like you're writing code for your body and your ear and the tips of your fingers. To be learning all this material. So that's one of the reasons I don't like playing with a metronome at the very beginning. I just like to give my body the chance to just write this code, if you will, in just a really pure, really relaxed, really chill way. Now we're going to go to the second part of this, which is to play a different number of notes per bow, and I'm going to actually set up the drone for this. Okay, now that we have the drone going, we're going to get on to the second half of this first episode, and that is we're going to play through the scale, starting with 1 note per bow, then 2, 3, and then you can kind of go up on your own. Now, the reason that this is useful is I find that oftentimes when I'm doing something slowly without the metronome, you tend to learn it faster. I find that practicing with the metronome, it's really great for working on your time, but sometimes that kind of takes so much of your attention that you're not making the connections as quickly or as efficiently as if you were just to do them sort of ametronomically at the beginning of learning a new skill. So when I play the 1 note per bow separate, I'm going to be thinking about dropping my right arm, really, really getting a good core sound on all of these. So you can play along with me. If we're not perfectly lined up with time to sort of chase each other around, that's totally fine. Here we are. 3, 4. Next, we'll do 2 notes per bow. Again, kind of an easy, nice tempo. Here we are. So it'll be like 3 and 4 and. And then 3 notes per bow. Something like 3, 4. And then 4. And then 5. And then 6. And then 7, which will be 1 octave per bow. And then 8. You can keep going as much as you want. Maybe I'll do one more. On 9s, I'm thinking about the grouping being 3 groups of 3. So, like that. So 9s. That could have gone a little better. I'll practice it. So the point of this, again, before we leave, the point of this is just to map the number of notes per beat by doing it with the bow, but without the metronome actually going, so that when you plug it into the rhythmic gradation exercise, you'll kind of have that new bow feeling of how the notes are grouped together.